Okay. Welcome to Peoplz and Dragons. I'm Director Peoplz, and I direct the interactive sci-fi fantasy series Gamma Haven. As a fan of all mediums of fantasy and fiction, from games, film, and literature, I developed a deep passion for writing and creating worlds. I discovered that I actually enjoy creating story elements on the fly as opposed to a pre-planned plot, and found a great sense of achievement in forming cohesive plots, using story elements that weren't meant to exist together or were not planned to exist together. But like a complex puzzle, there's always a way, and that's where I find most of my enjoyment. I feel everybody has a story to tell, and I want to be the one that ties all that together. So for the past few years, we've been doing just that with our flagship series, Gamma Haven. I'm very proud of what we as a community accomplished so far, but I knew that there was room for improvement, hence the hiatus. I've been working hard on improving my methods of orchestrating all this chaos for the best results possible, and have returned with nothing but high hopes and aspirations. I'm honored to share this all with you. You know, if you've been waiting for season 3, then I thank you for your patience. If you're new to the community, then welcome to the family. Buckle up, because we have a lot to get into, and I'll leave some timestamps in the description and comment section below should you want to jump across the parts. Let's begin. Peoplz and Dragons is designed to bring life to the imaginary characters you always made up in your head, but never saw the light of day, either because they were too overpowered for your older siblings' D&D campaign, or you didn't have the budget to fund a film to be made depicting their gloriousness. Peoplz and Dragons is here to give your awesome ideas and creations a place to prosper and grow alongside everyone else's. Think of it like the Oasis from Ready Player One, where all the avatars are other people's creations, each from their own respective universes. Universes such as our first flagship series, Gamma Haven, a sci-fi fantasy setting where your characters and ideas are woven into a episodic series that takes place in settings embroiled in turmoil and drama, but it evolves with the players. And so because everyone has their own story arcs, we end up seeing a little bit of everything. You know, it's fantasy, it's sci-fi, it's pretty much going to be whatever type of characters are involved. Gamma Haven is an interactive series where the audience assumes the role of a character that they create that will exist in the setting and share narrative. What was just an episodic audio drama is now a massive multiplayer role-playing game, as you and other listeners dictate and influence what happens in the show. The drama that is created by your actions, alliances, and rivalries become the focal point of the show's plot, which I think is kind of cool. To get involved is just a few simple steps. All you would need to do is write and submit what your actions are relative to any given situation, and sit back and watch it all unfold in a dramatic cinematic presentation. The chances of your character's success is, however, based on the odds governed by your character's own skill set and how they'd fare in a particular circumstance. All in tangent with everyone else's actions calculated into one outcome. Therefore, events can unfold in any direction, and it can play out in many ways. And so holistically, Gamma Haven is more about the what, where, and why, and world building, as opposed to the more gaming mechanics of, say, Dungeons and Dragons or traditional RPG progression. At any moment, a character could have their moment, and that's the good part. The objective of Gamma Haven is to act as your character would in a dystopian cyberpunk setting and make your own mark on the world. So your actions will almost always have you cross paths with other player characters, resulting in new allies, enemies, opportunities, and most importantly, drama. So Your character's actions will be made to fit right in with the story, with everyone else's, potentially having them become part of a major plot. The actions you submit will not always play out how, the way you submitted them, but I'll make it as close as possible, keeping in mind of what other factors can completely change the scene, right? So as director, I will orchestrate plots, tie together character story arcs, and magnify your escapades. Now more than ever, players will need to be strategic with their role-playing decisions to ensure the odds are in their favor of seizing their desired outcome. But more on that later. So whether you're looking to toss in your hat in the ring as a character, or perhaps just spectate and watch the creations you submit come to life, Gamma Haven is where everyone's radical ideas collide. Boom. Character creation is purposefully simple. No stats, no dice rolls, nothing to read up on, and just a few rules. All we need to know are the key pieces of information about your character, and then you'll be able to flesh out further details on your character sheet later. Players will get access to their own character sheet. They'll be able to update journal entries and so on and so forth, but more on that later. That's coming soon. But if you are new to Gamma Haven, you can approach this in two ways. You can create an original character from scratch, someone whose story starts the first episode they're in, or you could bring in an original character you created from somewhere else and have this become an alternate universe for them. Think of the multiverse, something like that. Maybe like a cameo appearance. I always think of the fighting games where like Yoda shows up in Soul Calibur and it's like, what are you doing here, Yoda? That could be your character. Whichever you decide, just prepare to integrate them into the setting in a way that works for them. So, if you're a Viking, Vikings can be in this type of setting. Just know it's a very futuristic world, but there are aspects of the world that are not so futuristic. As I said, it's a melting pot of just people's minds. So whatever you bring to the table is what we'll build on. Creating a character is agreeing to becoming part of a world, part of a story that I'm orchestrating. And so it's important that we keep the population free of bots or players creating and controlling multiple characters. That's forbidden. So by signing into the P&D website, that's when you'll be able to create a character after you sign in. That way we're able to kind of keep a log of you as a character in the game. Race. You'll choose from a long list of races, each created by players in the game at some point in time. Periodically, we will open submissions up for more races only after we have fleshed out the current ones that we have, as well as build some history behind them. But the players will define what type of population each race is made of, which is what I think is cool. So when you choose a race, just remember you're now a member of that community. That's a totally separate community, and you're pretty much going to define, what kind of people, your race is. And I'm sure we'll see different variations. But does your race have a seemingly broad spectrum of characters and behaviors? That's going to be nice to see. Or maybe the players make a role-playing agreement to have a particular race live a certain kind of way. It's going to be up to the people that form these different groups and cliques. All the races vary in characteristics and traits, so as long as you remain true to the core characteristics of that race, if any, you can get as creative as you like. So for example, the Wardenaries, they're very physically, they are short and broad, wide and stocky. Just keep that in mind. We're not going to have no really tall, thin LeBron James Wardenaries running around, unless your mutation kind of allows that. But players can submit lore for any of the categories, and we heavily encourage you all to invest into your own race's culture and really build that out. So as whenever you get an opportunity to submit lore, think about your race, and try to build on that race's culture. Imagine an entire faction, imagine an entire fraction of the player base dedicated to bringing their own character's race to life, with role-playing rules such as, religious doctrine or strict life tenets to live by. That would be cool to see. That's a big undertaking and will take some organization, but in a community of world builders and role players, I wouldn't put nothing past it. PunkType. We are entering a new age in the tank where its inhabitants need to sustain themselves and make a living. So we are taking a deep dive into the city's inner workings and lifestyles with PunkTypes. Almost every character now will have a trade or lifestyle that gives them a leg up in the world of Gamma Haven. So PunkTypes are simply the foundation for the role that your character plays in society. So just like how your abilities define what you were good at, thus giving you an edge, each PunkType has an aspect of society that they will have influence over. So you'll choose from a selection of PunkTypes that you can then customize and flavor to further define how you envision your character. But PunkTypes, they're pretty vague, and you'll pretty much fall into a box. PunkTypes such as a celebrity, a drifter, maybe you are a mystic, an executive, a mechanic, a mercenary, scientist, spy, doctor, terrorist, whatever it is your character does for a living, it can fall into one of these classifications, but by all means, be as creative as possible. Again, we're just talking about the different society and the different aspects of society that you're going to be falling into. Are you a wandering ninja looking for the strongest opponent in the world? Then maybe you'll want to choose drifter, or a mercenary type. Do you practice magic, or are you a veterinarian? Choose mystic or choose doctor. PunkTypes are essentially lifestyles that give you prominence and purpose in various aspects of the ecosystem. It's a building block that justifies your proficiency and knowledge in that area of expertise. So some events may even require someone of a particular type, PunkType, in order to fully make the most of that opportunity, which again encourages teamwork and factions and building relationships. Being of a particular PunkType, we encourage players to create and submit lore that involves that lifestyle. Think of it as a guild. So for example, if you're a weapons maker, then by all means, when you have an opportunity to submit lore, submit your weapon design, your weapon creation, so that we can then see those weapons getting used by characters in the show, because everything is going to be made of what the characters submit. So, that's why I never really dove into weapons that were being used in the past until Jacob came and started creating weapons. Then you start to slowly see them. And let alone, they were being used by him, but feel free to start creating, and this is just an example, weapons for the general public. And that goes for anything. Are you a television producer? Then tell us what shows the people will see when they turn on their holographic television. So the population of each PunkType is predominantly responsible for that aspect of the culture in the show. No one is locked out from creating lore for anything in particular. However, those that are of that type will be prioritized. But more on that later when we discuss a new role-playing mechanic called RolePunk. Let's talk about abilities. So, this game, this show, this interactive experience is driven by narrative details, meaning that whatever detail you submit in your actions is what's taken into play. So the outcome or result of a scene is determined by your submitted actions versus any unforeseen circumstances or opposition posed by other players with conflicting goals, if that makes sense. So abilities define your character's strengths and are the areas your character excels at. they will have an advantage when facing obstacles or accomplishing tasks that involve this area of expertise. So every character is meant to be good at something, right? But not everything. So you will need to utilize others to accomplish what is out of reach of your own skill. You have free range to be as creative as possible with your skill set. And remember, you have the freedom to attempt anything that is physically possible. But just remember, if your actions are not supported or governed by your ability, race, or punk type, then your objective can be challenging and there may be some unexpected results. But probably probability wise, there's always a chance of success. So if your character can't swim, it's not one of your abilities, but you know that where you're going, there's going to be water, feel free to swim. Just know that if you are challenged or if you encounter something, swimming is not going to be your strong point, right? That makes sense. So there are three types of abilities. There's mutations, skills, and assets. When a player is using one of their abilities to accomplish a goal, they in turn gain better odds of success. Each player can have a total of 3 abilities max, consisting of however many ability types you want, with the exception being that you can only have 1 mutation. But you'll find that skills and assets, and of course mutations, are your lifeblood. Obtaining advantages is the name of the game in any scenario. And so having the skill, asset, or ability to interact with the world in your favor and more often is dependent upon what your 3 abilities are. So let's discuss ability types. But before we do that, I just want to preface it all by stressing that abilities are incredibly important. Back to what I was saying, it's more important now to be very strategic than ever, because unless supported by your ability, race, or punk type, you have the physical and mental competencies of the average citizen of your race. So, in the past, I had people jumping off of buildings and landing on their feet. It was very over the top, but we're moving away from that. The action is a little less over the top and now more grounded for everyone, making their abilities that much more useful. Not to mention, in a game of narrative warfare, if someone says you're standing in quicksand, then you just might be standing in quicksand, if they put that in their submission. And that's a bad example, but what I'm saying is, details can hurt you. So you want to be able to have the skills to back you up for any given situation. Another thing to consider is, again, heights, bullet wounds, sickness, hunger. All these things can come into a scene, can come and be a factor, especially with enemies. Your enemies will be able to play on these things as well. But let's continue. Mutations. Mutations are innate and are the result of genetic modification. After all, by default, all the players are gamma types. Gamma types are living beings created by advanced technology, dark magic, whom have access to natural abilities once awakened from within them. That's how they were created. So mutations can be anything from the gift of flight to chocolate scented skin. It's totally up to you. I really want people to get creative. I don't want you to think that you have to have a very powerful mutation because, again, it's all about story, and I want to dive into characters who are really interesting. So mutations should be distinct and stem from the character themselves, unlike an asset ability, which is external and can be bestowed and given and traded and taken, and very unlike a skill ability. A mutation cannot be taught or learned like a skill could. So your mutation is specific in its nature, and it's mature in its potential. So nothing more, nothing less than what it is. So if you can fly, then you can fly. I don't want you to think that one day you can improve your flight ability. You're already just really good at flying, and it'll remain that way. So for these reasons, your mutation can be whatever you want it to be, no matter how powerful your ability is. What matters is how practical it is in the given scenario you're faced with. So mutations can certainly make you unique, especially when paired with a good selection of accompanying skills or assets. So you can only have one mutation, and you will be asked when creating your character to describe one specific talent that you are capable of doing with this mutation. So for example, if your mutation is fire manipulation, then we'll need you to explain your talent and capability. Tell us the one thing you can manipulate with fire. You know, can you shoot fire from your hands? Or do you use fire to give you flight? That is the talent. So you have fire manipulation, but what are you doing when you manipulate fire? You have to be very specific. Remember, one specific talent that you are capable of with your one mutation. Skills. So, a skill is an ability you learn and can teach. Whether it's martial arts or a skill of intimidation, you are considered to be an expert, and this justifies the extraordinary feats that you attempt in your action submissions. So feel free to flavor the skill however you want. For example, an assassin's sword technique seems like it could be supernatural, but they are just, maybe it's just a family secret that was passed down to assassin, and maybe you managed to master that skill to the point where you're so good at it, it looks like it's, you know, like a super move, but it's technically a skill. You can flavor anything you want as long as it's in the rule set, in the realm of a skill. Another example is alchemy and magic. These are things that can be learned and taught. So to keep that in mind as well. You can be, when you get specific, you'll want to kind of flesh out those things, if that makes sense. So, you know, skills are vital, and they help further flesh out your character's capabilities and control over the narrative. Players can put obstacles in your path, and without a refined skill set to defend or make an impact with, you could fall victim to pretty much anything. Back to the quicksand reference. Now, you know, I can't see there being quicksand unless you're like somewhere where there's quicksand, or if the person has the ability to make quicksand, but you get what I'm saying. Assets. Asset abilities are more so external booms for your character. An example of this would be a special high-powered cybernetic arm attached to you, or a highly competent butler that knows every language and martial art, or maybe a business that you operate that is a main focal point of your character's own story arc, and it brings you a lot of power and a lot of respect. These are assets. Asset abilities are just as part of your character as mutations and skills are. Okay, so think hard about your ability loadout, for it cannot be changed unless it's an emergency. When you choose your abilities and skills, you're gonna build on that, but it's gonna remain that. So mutations and assets can separate you from the next character by a long shot. Skills can make surviving the city possible and give you the edge over your adversaries and hurdles. Keywords. Success in Gamma Haven comes more often to those who can manage control over the narrative, over the scene. This means keeping your character involved in situations that they have influence over. So having a keyword attached to your character expands your narrative advantage and gives you an edge over topics related to that keyword. For example, a mercenary is always stocked up on ammo. However, a mercenary character with the merchant keyword knows where to find ammo for half the price, and can thus then justify always having a bit more money than the average mercenary, just because he knows of all the merchants and has a good relationship with them and can save money. However you interpret the word merchant, if it's your keyword, you can bend it however you want, as long as it's involved with merchant, which in turn gives you an advantage, right? So by default, players get to choose, players will be able to choose a racial keyword that they'll get and be able to pull from a pool of keywords exclusive to each race. And also keywords will often come with rewards in the form of assets like items, equipment, special abilities, and sometimes you'll just get a keyword by itself as a reward. But yeah, a lot of the things you win and earn are gonna come with keywords, and that's what's gonna make characters very powerful, because they'll be able to start tying in their abilities and skills with the new keywords that they get. And it's like it kind of reminds me of remember those alchemy games where they just gave you basic materials and you got to mix them and you get more and more and more, something like that. Let's discuss lore submissions. This is one of the biggest changes to Gamma Haven, and it's how we do lore submissions. In the past, we would always have lore contests here and there. You submit something, it might show up in the episode. Whenever I need an enemy, I'll pull from all the enemies that people created. Whenever I need a location, I'll pull from the locations, and it was pretty random. But now, lore contests are what's going to be fueling the action phases in the season. So before every action phase, we are going to have a lore contest, and we'll be asking players to submit lore creations into all of the world building categories that we have. The world building categories are as follows: artifacts, characters, creatures, culture, diseases, factions, iconic locations, religion, and technology. We will then vote on the submissions that we like the most, and the top ones will be added into the world's lore and possibly be used in future arcs. The top 3 submissions that we will vote on will become the sole plot points for the story arcs in the upcoming season. So, this is why for all lore submissions, we are asking our audience to submit ideas that are not tied to any characters or themselves, because that's the fun part. That's what the seasons are for. Story arcs are taking the place of events and are the entry points into smaller campaigns. So think of each of the story arcs as individual arcs that will unfold concurrently with each other and involve characters that are submitting actions into them. So this is going to create diverse storylines among diverse characters as they focus on the aforementioned lore submissions, which will be major plot devices for each story arc. Excuse me. So for example, a bounty hunter, a fishmonger surgeon, and a Viking with cybernetic abs walk into a haunted bar. That's pretty much what every story arc is going to be like. It's going to be a random hodgepodge, and I'm going to make a story out of it. So, each of those types of characters could be there for a different cause, but as I orchestrate, they'll all cross paths, and that's the fun part for me and y'all, is seeing how it all comes together. So we want players to choose an arc, one of 3 arcs, that has a plot device that interests them and one that they feel resonates with their character. Side note, you can only choose one arc to enter. So please choose only one arc and submit actions for only one arc, or you will be disqualified. Each arc's description will simply give a brief synopsis on the plot device and how it fits in the world. The rest of its lore will be made collectively as everyone involved in the arc gets spun into a story made from each of your submissions. So, not all characters will make the cut. However, it is safe to say that if your character is unique and your approach makes for a great show, then your character will likely appear. So think of it like a battle royale game, and the Gamma Haven spotlight shrinks around the player who has the most going on with their growing story. As a player, you want to make your own spotlight or become part of someone else's spotlight. Again, if you don't make the cut, that's fine, because the next phase is just around the corner. Okay, so once you're part of a story arc, you have a chance to act each action phase, even if you aren't the main focus. So if you don't end up in the first episode, you still have a chance to go for the second and the third. So that means you have 3 whole opportunities to play an important role and maybe even steal the show in the end. So by filling out a simple form, you will write what it is your character is going to do, and then write your reason for doing it. And your goal is to make the plot item in that story arc relevant to your character. So if it's an item, why do you need it? If it's a location, is there anything at that location for you? Why do you care about the location? Maybe it's a disease. Is it impacting you or your family in a negative or an interesting way? Here's another example of how characters with diverse backgrounds can collide. So let's say the plot device is a location, and this is the location that somebody submitted in the last lore contest. And let's say the location is a coffee shop. A hacker character might go there because the Wi-Fi will allow them to hack a major corporation nearby. A mercenary may go there because their target visits that coffee shop every day at 7 a.m. And then finally, a chef might go to this location, might go to this story arc because the coffee shop is paying top biz quirks for a chef for the entire week. So the objective will be dictated by the players. Their reasons for going there is going to be totally up to the players. And that leaves me with the challenge of making a story out of it the only way that I can. I love doing that. So be creative and unique, because this is a story that your character will star in, and we want to capture those great moments. And I'd imagine not everything will result in violence, right? So I can see some really fun and interesting stories happening. Each following phase will have a new plot item that further advances the story arc, and players will need to continue to submit actions and answer those questions to achieve their goals in time for the third and last episode, the climax. So 3 separate story arcs will run in tangent with each other, and will have a beginning, middle, and ending, giving the characters involved 3 action phases to achieve their goals, and most importantly, put on a show. The characters who come out on top of an arc are subject to rewards and become commemorated for their accomplishments, because these story arcs will usually have large character developing endings and have you achieving satisfying feats. Regarding the form that you fill out when you're submitting actions, there will be some length limits enforced, some word limits, as we ask and encourage you to be clear, concise, and brief. So you will have a place for details, but only to embellish on the aforementioned actions and reasonings behind them. But in addition, you will be able to also submit 2 details to the scene that can either negatively impact those who oppose you or positively assist your cause. So the details can be whatever you want them to be, though those details are flimsy and easily trumped by any details that are governed by the person's abilities, race, so on and so forth. So for example, if you are a character who doesn't resort to violence, then maybe a detail you would submit states that the area is flooded with civilians and that these civilians help conceal you from any hostiles. And you can do that without a stealth ability. It's just a matter of you just putting it in there as a detail. And that's a good way to bring the scene into your favor. But if there's a character who their ability is the ability to cause mass hysteria, and they say something like all the civilians are going crazy and attacking whomever, because it's backed by their hysteria ability, that detail is going to trump your flimsy detail of people being around, you know? So it's literally detail warfare. With limitations placed on how much you can submit in your form, you will need to choose what matters to you the most and what you're going to put your focus on. Do you write more about ensuring that the hostages are safe until Haven Guard support arrives? Or do you focus your actions on taking out your enemy head on? Perhaps use all of your space to write about being more prepared for your rivals' lethal traps that you're almost certain they're going to write about in their actions. So you kind of have to choose, you know, what you're going to focus all your words on, which is, you know, there's some strategy in that as well. So again, this is literal warfare, because what you write and how much you write directly affects your odds of success. Exceeding that word limit and or using the details box for anything other than describing your chosen actions will put you at risk of disqualification. So please don't drop any additional actions in there. Just elaborate on the details of your chosen actions. The detail box is for you to just kind of expand on it. So for example, are you planting a virus? The details box is a good place to put the name of the virus, so you don't have to use up words. Are you going to be fighting somebody? The details box is a good place to elaborate on the techniques you're using. The goal is a faster turnaround. So the less I have to read, the faster I can process the information, and I can really do my thing when making more with less. Opposition, ranks, and results. As director, I will take your actions and pull them through, remaining as accurate to your core expectation as possible. You will see variance in your character's actions when I'm making what you submitted fit into the grand scheme and into the scene that may have been altered by other players or circumstances beyond anything you could have expected. So just keep that in mind. If your actions conflict or is being tied into another player's actions, you will see some variance in what you submitted, but will always be for the greater good of the story. In the past, players had a core rank that would slide up and down whenever they were successful. The higher your rank was, the more likely you were to have a scene play out your way. This was by design, making it so that some characters held more narrative control, and depending on if they were naughty, neutral, or nice, they would gain enemies and or allies with conflicting or aligned goals, right? Think Anarchy 12 and Haven Guard. Anarchy 12 has a very high rank, Haven Guard does not, but they are slowly going back and forth. Haven Guard gets a little bit stronger. I could pull control from anyone. At any given moment, a factor could be added into the story that tilts the scales, making it so that when dice are rolled, you couldn't be certain of which side would win. So the focal point was story, and whoever was successful just had things go their way more often for a stint until I decided to release the Kraken and shake things up, hence Fist of the Endless. At minimum, I always made sure both sides had some sort of spectacle or impact, even if for a brief moment. However, now everyone by default will always remain at base rank. When you cross paths with opposition or are trying to overcome a situation, as director, I will judge who gets bonus or penalty rank shifts based off of the advantages and disadvantages characters made for themselves via the actions that they submitted. My logic and judgmental reasoning is an entirely different package to unfold, but I will, more on that later. But you'll be able to see the thoughts that go behind why things played out the way they did. So with less attention on ranks, we can focus on what determines your ranks to begin with, which is the narrative that you provide in your submitted actions. So even in the old way, if you wrote the right things, you could get a total advantage and overcome anarchy. It just depends on what you're writing and who's assisting and so on and so forth. But we're taking a lot of focus away from ranks and we're focusing on the narrative. Seasons and rewards. A season consists of 3 story arcs unfolding across 3 separate action phases, right? We will see events play out from each arc across a span of 3 episodes. So anything can happen in these episodes, and we will surely bring closure to each arc on the 3rd episode, the climax. The characters who achieve their objectives are considered winners, and the winners will impact the world building part of the game just with their amazing feats as they continue on. With 3 episodes per season, we can get into a good flow. We can cover more ground, finish more stories as opposed to those really long drawn out stories, and make more history. So, season 1 and 2, they were longer story arcs that laid the foundation and history of Haven in the world. Season 3, however, will focus on shorter arcs, 3 shorter arcs, that will have a heavy impact and emphasis on world building and the characters in there. I think of it like comics, think of it like little mini comic books. You know what I mean? Winners of their respective arc will be rewarded by their arc, and their feats will be commemorated, putting them in the conversation about the greatest characters of Gamma Haven. So, character tier lists are going to be measured by a character's showmanship and impactful victories that they had over a span of all the arcs, as well as audience reception. So, what defines a great character is someone who's going to be successful in arcs and the things that they do, as opposed to ranks. In addition to the finale, in addition to that 3rd episode finale, as requested, each season will end with one fun episode. I mean, all the episodes are going to be cool and fun, but each season will end with one special episode that ties in the winning characters from each arc and anyone that they want to invite to celebrate with. It will be a non-canon episode that will involve contests, skill challenges, friendly competition, giving everyone an opportunity to win rewards for characters of their race, PunkType, or faction. There will be open roles to fill for guest characters for anyone who may want to make a cameo appearance. But a lot of this was inspired by the want for little fun episodes where, everybody just goes to Smaven's and has like a birthday party or something like that. Death and Maiming. Death. If a character crosses paths with another character who directly opposes them with violent intentions, the character on the receiving end will be maimed. In Gamma Haven terms, a maim will be something along the lines of a crippling setback to your well-being, and it will significantly impact your momentum. So a violent character may decapitate a limb, maybe take an eye, Whereas maybe a businessman may just have you beaten and thrown into a hostile prison for X amount of time. You will be encouraged to utilize other players or the setting to recover from your woes and your wounds. So at minimum, this would require, a wise person would use an action phase to take some time getting themselves back in working shape. It might require a phase's worth of attention to endure your wounds. I see a cybernetic arm and eye in your future, or maybe one made of magic, courtesy of the kooky witch doctor from the canals of the shady underground market. If you get maimed, however, 3 times in a single season, your character will permanently die. But even after death, there are options, right? But again, you get maimed 3 times. That third maim is going to be a permanent death. Now, you're probably thinking, how I would never get maimed 3 times. If you get maimed 1 time, you're essentially giving up your chance at the arc's reward, because if you consider there are only 3 phases, being maimed once can strategically impact your approach to the remaining 2 episodes in the season. So do you lay low and recover for an episode, or have you already lost too much control of the story arc and have one last episode to kind of catch up and turn the tables? Do you risk losing? Is your opposition even violent enough to want to maim and kill you? An even better question, is the reward even worth risking it? So, when you get maimed, you have some things to think about. Do I go back out there and jump into in the line of fire again? Because if I get maimed twice, I definitely probably won't have a good chance the third time, because I'll probably have some penalties because of my wounds. So that's the thought behind the new maiming process. Permanent death is still a thing, but it's a three strike process. And choosing to play it safe, you pretty much are running the risk of losing an opportunity, but at least you'll still have your life, right? Factions. If a player decides that they want to form a faction, they will need at minimum 2 additional players, real players, and then notify a moderator in our Discord server with the faction's details, and you'll be able to create a faction. So as a faction, if a minimum of 3 members win an arc together, you can opt for a clan reward. And a clan reward would be similar to winning any other award, except it would be exclusively beneficial to those in your faction, which could be a great thing. The other advantages of having a faction are kind of self-explanatory, right? Such as, your players will be more likely to be in an episode that includes your faction members, because you're kind of narratively tied together. And also, you'll receive bonuses to your odds of success just from having that ally support. So those are always benefits. All right, so RolePunk, the Discord role-playing game. RolePunk. So Gamma Haven at heart is a game show. Though it can be played in its entirety just by submitting actions when prompted. You don't even have to enter Discord or socialize with other players, but it can be taken to another level using the Discord server and possibly other mediums in the future. In addition to our general community rooms for general in-game and out-of-game chat, we also are going to have a RolePunk room where players remain in character and share their day-to-day lives, trade, lifestyles, while expounding on their deep, well-thought-out characters. Each PunkType has a role that highlights what their core responsibility is as a character of that lifestyle and as a player who is also a world builder. So a player who is a mechanic may periodically drop a few lines of their own story in the chat about their progress on a hovering truck that they've been fixing for another player. Or maybe a player of a doctor writes a mini manifesto on a discovery that they made about a patient and shares that with everybody in Discord, and they may put out piece by piece slowly throughout the day. It's totally up to you. The RolePunk room should be like glimpsing into the world of Gamma Haven itself, right? So as director, I will periodically rummage through the dialogue in the RolePunk chat, looking for interesting journal entries and roleplay dialogue from and between players, and I will randomly interject as an NPC with NPC dialogue to provide, or I'll narrate to provide narrative rewards. So if you are a winner of a previous arc, your entries could inspire future arcs as well. So for example, regarding that mechanic example I used earlier, as an NPC, I would then approach the player, and maybe I'll get off I get off work, I jump in there, I see something really funny that the mechanic wrote or they were doing throughout the day. I could approach that player and offer, as an NPC, offer to purchase or trade for the vehicle that they've been working on as a reward for their hard work, which could in turn result in an award, a perk, or a keyword. Excuse me. Or you'll be given the green light in response to your entry to create a mini story that we'll publish for all to see, potentially turning into actual lore. Turning your roleplay into actual lore. So I feel like RolePunk is something that could really give people the ability to kind of live their character. It was inspired by the Haven Punk game that we used to do, but this is now you as your own character, and into showing people the day-to-day of what your character does. In closing, Gamma Haven Season 3 is a revitalizing take on the game that we've been running for years. I just feel that I'm getting better at orchestrating the chaos. As I always say, this game and the story, it's going to exist and will continue to exist, whether it's one person playing or a million people playing. I like to write, and it's going to live on as I write. Might take breaks here and now and then, but you can bet your bottom dollar that the series is going to live on. And for Season 3, I'm really looking forward to it, because this is an opportunity for us to really dive into the world that we're building, more focused on world building and its characters. Enjoy the game.